Yes, this is in fact a romantic comedy anime. Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions is a pretty adorable anime. I haven't been through the whole series yet, but I'm really liking it so far. For those of you who are unaware, I'm not really a fan of romance. I just find everything about romantic shows or films really boring. Okay, I find most parts of romantic shows or films really boring, but as I was saying, I don't hate stories that have romance in it. Romantic subplots generally just don't interest me, and I tend to focus on the bigger picture. I'd like to mention the other romantic comedy anime that I've seen, Monogatari, which was definitely a great anime that's totally heartfelt with likable characters. However, I couldn't find myself enjoying it as much as other good series because it's a romance-focused anime. I'm not hating on the anime or the genre, but I think my own personal taste won't let me enjoy romantic stories even if I wanted to. It's like how you want to main a character in Smash Brothers, but no matter what you do, you just can't become good with that character. It's kinda like that. But I decided to give Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions a try, simply because I kept seeing posts and memes about it on Facebook. And the eye patch girl. Anime girls with eye patches are always cute. Anyways, after watching the first season, I can honestly say that I like it so far. Why? Like any other shows and films that I enjoy, it's because of the characters, but not only that, but also the premise, the animation, and the comedy. Now, first off, I will mainly be focusing on the first 6 episodes because the story changes tone and focus on the 7th episode. Despite that, the anime remains interesting and carries more emotional weight. But just keep in mind that this video essay will be fixated primarily on my first impressions of it. So we have our main protagonist, Yuta Togashi, a character who tries to be a normal student in high school after having suffered from Chunibyo in his middle school days. What is Chunibyo? It is a Japanese term meaning 8th grader syndrome, an early teen who has delusions of grandeur and want to stand out so much that they have convinced themselves they have hidden knowledge of secret powers. He is living with the embarrassment of his past self, and I think a lot of people can identify with him. You ever lie in bed at night trying to fall asleep, but then you remember an embarrassing moment in your life and then you can't get to sleep because you're cringing yourself awake? That's our protagonist, Yuta Togashi.
富樫勇太だ。この腕の包帯は訳あって外せない。黒煙竜が暴れ出してしまうのでな。ああ、心が痛いよ、ママ。
Immediately, I was able to relate to him, and I was already willing to invest myself in his story. He moved to a high school far from his middle school so that he could start fresh and become a normal high school student, abandoning his embarrassing past self. Then enters Rika Takanashi, the aforementioned cute eye patch girl. And she has an extreme case of 8th grader syndrome. She's a fun character to watch, and I honestly enjoy the anime whenever she's on screen and going on about her shenanigans.
やだ、入ってくる。私の中に。
変な声出すな。
残像。
We can also relate to her character because a lot of us know what it's like to be, or know someone who is an overenthusiastic kid that went through an anime phase.
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God and anime on my side! Wait,
She's the obligatory kawaii girl who becomes the love interest of our protagonist, a dramatic and theatrical character who I instantly ended up loving. Yeah, it's really easy for me to get attached to anime characters, especially when they have eye patches. What is it with me and girls with visual impairment? So, Takanashi becomes interested in Yuta because she saw him in his Dark Flame Master persona, unaware that he wasn't alone. She ends up spending a lot of time with him, which is a problem for Yuta because he just wants to live a normal life. If it sounds cliche, it kinda is. Right away, I was able to draw similarities to the anime, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. That's part of the reason why I like Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions, because it reminded me of that anime, one of the first animes I had ever watched, not counting Dragon Ball, Pokemon, or Yu-Gi-Oh! Because pretty much everyone has watched them. Here is a description that can be applied to the premise of both animes. A teenage boy once believed in the supernatural but has accepted reality when he enters high school. However, this turns out to be in vain because he encounters a girl who once held the same obsessions he previously had and is dragged along her misadventures. They start a club that doesn't really do much, but the members of the club develop their friendship among each other as they tackle the days together one by one. Basically, it was the setup of the plot that initially pulled me in. And the eye patch girl, God, I need to stop. I already talked about the main characters, but I want to do a little comparison here. Namely, between the protagonist Yuta and Takeo Guda of Oromonogatari and Kyon of The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. Now, I know Haruhi isn't a romantic comedy, but I'll be talking about both of these animes outside of their genres and focus on the characters themselves. Yuta is a fun character with a lot of personality, and that also holds true with the rest of the cast of Chunibyo.
じゃあ残りは明日。
誘うか。一緒に帰らない？いや待て。シミュレーションだ。反応予測。一緒に帰らない？
なんで？
ダメだ。
どうしたの、富樫くん。
I think that's why Oromonogatari didn't click for me. Their characters were nice and I did like them, but they weren't as exciting as the characters in Chunibyo.
いけそうなやつなら誰でもいいんだよな。ニコニコしてて愛想いいのが好きなんだよな。可愛い感じの。
そうかもしれない。
The characters in Chunibyo are a lot more caricatured, and that makes them more fun to watch.
この世界に一番必要なのは。
The protagonist in the series has a much more interesting goal. He wants to be a normal high school student. It may sound contradictory that him trying to be normal is an interesting story, but it's in direct conflict with the situation he's caught up in every day and the people he spends his time with, which is far from normal. And that clear contradiction between his desires and outside forces helps establish him as a character early on. For instance, he was blackmailed into taking care of a stray cat for Takanashi because her older sister Toka had a voice recording of one of Yuta's 8th grader syndrome moments. His goal of trying to be a normal student would be ruined if this recording went public, and it is because of that opposing force that he's going against is a reason that makes him very interesting. At one point, he also becomes motivated to tutor Takanashi to help her pass her math test, since if she gets below class average, the teacher will disband their club. Yuta doesn't really care much about the club, but after learning that Takanashi doesn't have other friends and that club means a lot more to her than he initially realized, he decides to help out, not wanting Takanashi to lose something that's important to her.
現空間において私を認識している存在はそれだけ。
The goals he has changes as the series progresses, but it still makes him a lot more interesting than the other protagonists that I've mentioned. Kyon doesn't really have a motive unless the plot demands one from him, such as the threat of the breakdown of reality. But it's not a personal goal like Yuta's is, and it's more like an obligation. I think anyone would get off their ass if the fabric of reality was at stake. Probably not me though, I'd actually sit back and see what it looked like. That is why he is such a good protagonist in the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, because he's a much more active protagonist in the film, and he has a goal that he is pursuing that is a lot more personal. Even though it is a problem with reality, the reason he is active is because of his relationship with all the other characters.
ガトや小泉が用済みになってるってことはあるまいな。それだと俺は脇役にもなれず、完全に部外者になってしまうじゃないか。それだけは嫌だ。
Now, Yuta does get dragged around by Takanashi, and the objectives he had that I mentioned aren't that prominent in his character, but he does have them, and it's enough to easily get a sense of what kind of character he is. He just wants to be normal and he wants to get rid of his embarrassing past, yet he is caught up in abnormal situations and his past always seems to catch up to him. Let's compare them to Takeo Guda. He's a lovable character, extremely selfless, and it's incredibly hard to hate him. His initial objective was to play matchmaker for Sunakawa and Yamato, falsely believing that Yamato had an interest in him. He does have a clearer goal that he actively works to achieve at the start, but it's a lot less exciting and the outcome is too predictable. We already know that Takeo will end up with Yamato and that the misunderstanding is really just for dramatic irony. Not much exciting things happen after that. I lost interest past the halfway point of the anime, and each episode didn't feel like it was that much different from the last, just more of Takeo and Yamato being a couple. To be fair, it is a romance, so it's to be expected to have such a normal situation, but that's why I have gotten a liking to Yuta more than Takeo. His premise and character is a lot more enjoyable to watch, and the setup leads to unpredictable scenarios. Now, I'm not knocking down Ora Monogatari, it's a romantic comedy and it does what it intends to do really well, but it wasn't as interesting to me as Chunibyo. As for the other main character of Chunibyo, Takanashi, she's just a wonderful character. She's cute, wild, enthusiastic, and her imaginative side makes for a lot of good laughs. And eye patch. Despite her childish demeanor, she is a lot more complex than she's initially made out to be, but I won't go into details since it's a bit of a spoiler. Besides the main characters, the rest of the cast are also ridiculously fun. We have the popular attractive class rep who is hinted at being interested in our protagonist, but actually had her own ulterior motives.
俺の部屋？何かあったの？
富樫君どうしたの？
She is polite and friendly in public, but when she's with her clubmates, she becomes a bit more irritable. She's a bit more harsh than her outward class rep persona, but deep down, she's a genuinely kind-hearted person who cares a lot about her friends. Then there's the aloof girl who loves to nap and is very empathetic towards her friends and tries to understand more about the delusions of those with 8th grader syndrome. I just want to say that she's great because she actually starts a napping club. A club that is focused on napping. That's actually considered a legitimate club activity, which is actually pretty awesome. Finally, we have a middle schooler who has 8th grader syndrome and is overenthusiastic like Takanashi and is always at odds with the aforementioned class rep.
今忙しいの黙ってて。
いや、でもさ、ほら。
何よ、うるさいわね。
She appears to be an idiot when we see her with her friends, but is actually popular in her class and has the top grades among her peers. These characters will put together create dynamic situations that create and push the plot. The plot is very character driven, rather than the other way around.
今見たことクラスで言ったら呪い殺すから。ゲーム銀で穴跡。
The main highlight, at least for me, of Chunibyo are the visuals and action sequences. The presentation of twisted reality stem from the delusions of 8th grader syndrome that is used in the action sequences are a wonder to behold, and a beautiful art style serves to further the visual appeal. A lot of times while watching this anime, I actually forget that I'm watching a romantic comedy.
なんだこれって何やってんだよお前は
During the comedic scenes, it feels like I'm watching a very toned down version of Nishijo's slapstick and manzai comedy style.
これによって言うとば。何やってんだ。いつ何時でも油断するなです。偽森様。森様言うな。
The detail and timing of the animation fits so perfectly with how the anime delivers the comedy, and I can't forget to mention the beautifully rendered backgrounds. So, the simple, straight-to-the-point explanation as to why I love this anime so much. It doesn't feel like a bland romance anime, and it is very similar to one of the first animes I have ever watched and loved. It's almost funny how much these two can actually be compared with each other. Now that I think about it, Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions parodies Haruhi in some ways. Haruhi takes place in a supernatural world, yet the protagonist is unaware of them and thinks that she's just an ordinary human in an ordinary world, when in actuality she has the power to control reality subconsciously. Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions is grounded in reality, but the protagonist has convinced herself that she has occult-like powers despite being just a normal human, or whatever you can consider her normal is. Rika Takanashi represents that side of us when we were kids and we were hopeful and enthusiastic and lived in our own little world believing we had hidden powers. Yura represents that side of us that has matured and is forced to accept the reality that we live in, but his relationship with Takanashi is also a symbol of how we really never let go of our inner child. And that's what really keeps us alive and what keeps us nostalgic and remembering the good old days of spending time outside with our friends and playing together and not doing taxes. This anime, when thought of in a deep level, really hits me, and I tend not to think of things this deeply. And all this is only from the beginning half of the first season of the anime. The plot refocuses on Takanashi and the tone changes somewhat, but I wanted to keep this essay focused on the beginning, not because it's only good in the beginning, but just the first episodes were so impactful that it pulled me into it, and now I'm fully invested in these characters and their stories, and by the time the genre shifts towards the more romantic side of it, I've already fallen into the trap. And I enjoyed this anime a lot. There are scenes that are truly emotional juxtaposed by the comedy and hilarious action. I really recommend others to give this anime a try, because I'm truly glad I decided to watch it. And all because it had an anime girl with an eye patch in it.